Welcome back.
Good to be back. It's been a while.
Thanks for being here.
Happy to be here.
Unfortunately, we only have 20 minutes. I'm going to move over so I can see that. Oh, 25 minutes. We just picked up 5 minutes.
We got bonus time.
Awesome.
Good.
So, I want to take a little bit of a tour through your background before we get into some of the topics of the day. A lot to talk about. But I think it's important because there's a lot of young, aspiring entrepreneurs and professionals in the audience, and it's always nice to see that, a professional path that leads to a status of iconic. I'm sorry, you're an iconic guy. You're iconic. The path that leads there isn't always a straight line. And, people say it's better to be lucky than good. I actually think it's better to be good when you get lucky. And so there's a lot of interesting things to unpack in your background. So we're going to take a little tour through that, but then we'll get to the topic. So Princeton, great get. Theater major, very interesting.
Started off as an engineer. I'm one of those guys who disappointed his parents. I was a mechanical and aerospace engineer on the way in. I graduated as a theater major, and I went off to become a bike tour guide in Europe. Some of you guys might know Butterfield and Robinson, high-end bike tour company similar to Backroads.
Perfect foundation for a great
Perfect foundation for a business career. Although actually, to be honest, you meet a lot of pretty interesting people doing that. And then came back to New York, and this is sort of the mid-'90s. I'm not quite as old as Mike Tyson, but close. But I'm here to fund, not to fight. Ha 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 ha. But anyway, so I landed in New York in the mid-'90s, and I basically was a resume, theater major, bike tour guide. What am I going to do? And figured I had a decent shot at doing something interesting if I could go to business school. And so I applied to Columbia, and I managed to get in partly because I wasn't in banking, I wasn't in consulting, and I was really interested in the internet, which at that point was sort of just an idea. I had one of the first email addresses in New York. It was a thing called The Pipeline, founded by Michael Crichton, the novelist, who was also a big sort of tech aficionado. Anyway, I came through that, and still the internet was just getting going. Netscape, I guess, had launched. And in fact, it felt very much like today's moment feels with AI.
Yeah.
I guess everybody is saying that, but I lived it. I'm telling you, very similar. Where enthusiasm got you a long way. And I came out of business school, and instead of going into consulting or anything like that, I went and I worked for a security company, a thing called Kroll Travel Watch, which I'm sure no one here has ever heard of. And effectively, we were putting out the real scoop on travel to cities around the world. It was the time of globalization. Middle managers from John Deere were going down from Minneapolis to Rio de Janeiro and just getting rolled because they had no idea how dangerous the place was. So we were putting out travel security through Sabre, through the network. And I like to say that we were one of the first clickbait providers because it was the same time the O.J. Simpson trial was on. In order to get people to pay attention to the travel security updates, we would do live updates so travel agents could get their updates on the O.J. trial as we went. Anyway, it didn't last all that long. A friend of mine from business school had gone to Microsoft, and as they started to think about starting up what was then known as the Microsoft Travel, cunningly, they went recruiting, and I guess he knew that I was really interested in this internet stuff, knew my way around Sabre, and so I went out and interviewed with Rich Barton and got hired as the first business guy. I had absolutely no notion of working at a big company or Microsoft. I didn't hardly even know what it was. I just knew this internet thing was super interesting, and I was willing to do whatever it took to kind of get in there. And I was rewarded for that by, after I started, Rich said, well, why don't you go out and see if you can sign up all the rental car companies? And so that was basically my first year.
Hit the road.
Yeah, hit the road. So, and then from there, I sort of found the passion around marketing, and marketing it's so funny, it sounds so straightforward now, but marketing a URL was a big deal. That hadn't really been done a whole lot before, and we had just a terrific time building up the brand, taking it national, international, et cetera, et cetera.
When did you know in that run that you were onto something? When did you sort of first have that sense that this Expedia thing might work out?
So this is the thing that's kind of cool. I was thinking you might ask about that because it's quite different from today, where I would say that. So we launched Expedia in 1996, right? So 1995, 96, we're sort of building the thing out. We launched in 96. I would say by a year in, by like 1997, I had drafted up a strategy memo. Not me, but whatever. We had drafted up a memo that basically said the logical outcome here is to become the biggest retailer of travel in the world. And people were like, well, that's absurd. I mean, American Express at the time, I guess it just merged with Rosenbluth, $13 billion company. We're like, no, the economics, the logic, the technical, what makes sense is, as people become online, that's the right goal for this company. This is before merchant hotels, and we figured out the economics a bit better. But it was that clear that fast. And what's so interesting right now with the AI world, I mean, I can't sit here and say with any certainty what the world's going to look like in 2 or 3 years. So it's much more like the 1994, 1985. By the time you got out just into a few years into the internet and browsers and so forth, the top line of every spreadsheet was percentage of the American population with broadband access. And you could sort of run out, it was like railroad tracks you could run out. And what's so interesting right now is we're not there yet.
Not even close, right? And it's so interesting, though, that you bring up that point of how 1993 was similar to now, because in addition to all of the promise and excitement and enthusiasm, there was a lot of skeptical, right? A lot of people thought www.what, right? That it was never going to work and it was going to be terrible. Yeah.
Oh no, it was crazy. There were so many people. Listen, the vested interests are always going to be skeptical.
Yeah.
Right? And definitely anybody right now, if any of you young people are working for a travel company that says AI won't matter, I encourage you to look for another job. But the vested interests, of course, there's always people who you don't want the internet. You've got these massive apparatus of agents and retail storefronts that are so good at closing customers who come in off the street. You don't want the internet, and so of course you're going to say no internet, please.
Yeah.
Can't stop it. Same thing with AI. Absolutely can't stop it at this point. Genie is out of the bottle.
And do you think, though, and we'll come back to some of the other topics, but do you think AI will have that same sort of profile where in 3 or 4 or 5 years we'll have some clarity of where it's going and what it'll be, and so the commercials will become more certain? I do.
I think right now it's the time to be a student and just do everything you can to sort of try to keep track. And it's incredibly difficult. I mean, like I said, I'm sort of a marketing person. I'm not really a technical person, but the outlines of a world in which everybody is represented out in the technical world by an agent, those outlines, I think partly because all the leaders of all the big AI companies are talking about it, that's becoming sort of clear. It's still very difficult to understand, well, what does that mean in terms of interaction with all the service providers out in the world? I mean, one of the things that I believe, with absolutely unencumbered by any data or evidence, I do think that this new world where everybody's represented by agents is gonna be the catalyst for a complete revamping of the travel tech stack, all the way right down to the PMS, to the GDS level, because rates and availability right now. So I was on the board at SiteMinder for years, one of the leading channel managers, and rates and availability are sort of protected from the onslaught of searching by channel managers, by layers and layers of technology. They're not, here's an example. Let's just say that you've got your admin and you want to book some travel, I mean, you've got things like auto coming up, right, which will probably replace this travel-specific instance. But still, let's say you're going to do that, and you kind of are like, well, if I book direct with the hotel, maybe I can get a better rate, or maybe if there's a problem, it'll be easier than if I go through one of the third parties. To take nothing away from Expedia and Booking, which are wonderful, but a lot of people do that. Well, if I ask for my agent to do that, and another 100 million people do, and they all want to be kind of ready for when I ask the question if I ask it, so they're going to go out and want to ping the PMF systems every day, multiple times. We're not engineered for anything even close. Approaching that.
Yeah.
And so I do think we're going to see a whole new layer is going to spring up that's going to be companies that are effectively about protecting and managing inventory. And just take yield management as an example. I mean, the yield management tools we have today feel quite sophisticated out of the edge, but they're going to feel like toys within a few years. Yeah. But I can't tell you how. I just sort of...
So in this case, maybe power to the picks and the axes and the Levi jeans of this gold rush?
Yeah. I think that there's... I really do think that the idea of the agent that represents the traveler has legs and is real, but I can't tell you right now who exactly is going to develop that. I know there will be specific context. Travel's, I think, a fairly obvious one because it's complicated. Yeah. I think banking is another fairly obvious one. Financial services is complicated. It's very private. I mean, having somebody, it would be kind of nice right now if I could sort of say, please go and do all my stocking stuffer shopping through Amazon and Uncommon Goods. That would be a nice thing to be able to do, and I would be perfectly comfortable doing that today.
From a startup perspective, though, and every sort of, technical revolution is a little bit different, of course. And when we look back at 93, 5, 4, 5, a lot of the sort of traditional incumbents in industry were caught totally flat-footed, and they ignored the internet, right? And so there was an opportunity for entrepreneurs to, leverage the element of surprise, as it were. But in this revolution of AI, the big guys are on it, right? And they have mountains of resources. They have all of the engineers. They're hammering away. They're trying to solve the problem. I don't think that that's necessarily going to shut down the opportunity for the experimenters, but the dynamics are going to be different. And so do you think that the big dogs will be able to sort of suck all the creativity out of the room, or is the dynamic going to be different in some way?
No way. I mean, and the reason I know
it's a rhetorical question, by the way.
Yeah, no, of course, right? Yeah, whatever you do, don't give up. No, and the reason you know that, we all know that, is because the economics of distribution and travel don't favor a monolithic solution. I mean, if they did, right, Google would run everybody's PMS, and they would control all the pricing and the inventory and the marketing and the search. That's just not how it works. That's not how competition works, right? At the end of the day, you still have hotels and airlines and car rental companies and so on with a thing to sell for a certain amount of money, and they're not going to give all the power to one company.
Right.
Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So that's how the Soviet Union collapsed.
Right.
Right. Basically.
So, one of the things that you'll find if you dig into Erik's background is a big passion for the outdoors. A lot of that started when you were a little kid growing up in Montreal and spending time at a summer camp for boys, which you now own. Mm-hmm. Interesting story, we'll come to that. But also has been involved in a number of other outdoor companies and activities. And much of that is around a commitment to climate change and trying to get people more focused on the planet. Are you worried? We're not even talking about climate today, right? there's so much energy and hype around AI that topic has now slipped to the back. Does that give you concern, or do you think AI will somehow play a significant role in helping to accelerate climate action?
Well, yeah, so it's one of my favorite topics. And I would say, unfortunately, climate hasn't slipped to the back. It's just stayed at the back. But I mean, we are looking at a world that's so different from even 5 years ago, because over the next 4 or 5 years, there's 2 huge tipping points coming. One is going to be the release of AGI or ASI, superintelligence. We don't know, but I mean, I'm in the camp that says AGI probably exists already. It's just behind the walls of the big company.
Artificial general intelligence.
Artificial general intelligence, who don't know, which is the basic idea that a machine is better at any given task than any human is. Superintelligence is sort of the idea that the machines are better than the combined human intelligence, which that's where things, I guess, gets pretty scary potentially. However, that's also where potential solutions come to these big modeling problems in climate. I mean, on a more prosaic level, the thing about climate is it doesn't sort of factor into people's awareness that over the next 4 or 5 years, we're now on a path where the 1.5 degrees Celsius average temperature mean, we're going to go through that. The Paris Accords haven't worked. The voluntary ideas haven't really worked. Government action hasn't really done it. We are sort of hoping that we're going to get some sort of technical change. I mean, one of the reasons that I spend time on outdoor stuff, like my newest board, I just joined the board of HipCamp, which is the biggest marketplace for doing
500,000 campsites, 7 million nights sold.
People getting outside. I own the camp, 500 kids a summer, get them outside.
Check it out if anyone likes camping.
I'm on the board of the Adventure Travel Trade Association. I think it's really important that people get out and they experience the natural world, partly so that they understand what they're going to lose with climate change.
Yeah.
It's very hard to understand. Like, you guys have all seen the horrific footage of Asheville, North Carolina, or Valencia, just to pick a couple things that happened in the last 90 days. You don't understand the power of those floodwaters going through town if you haven't ever been by a river, right? Like, if you're just a city person and you don't understand what the natural world is, and that puts you at great risk. And we as a society puts us at great risk. And I am hopeful, I will say, I am quite hopeful that we will find that AI is able to model the climate system in a way that our current system simply can't. I think any climate scientist who's being honest will say it's just too complicated. But hopefully it won't be too complicated in a world where we've got the impetus to build the kind of computers that could train AI. Well, those are also the computers that are going to be able to help us.
And this is going to be a really important topic to travel, right? With all of the regulation and the response to this.
Right.
And what it's going to have, and how that'll affect the whole tech stack and reporting. And
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people here are paying attention to things like the European Green Claims legislation that's coming down in 27, I think. But basically, tour operators, if you're operating a tour operator in Europe, you're going to have to report your emissions, not on the ground, but including the emissions of the people who are coming in, flying in. And so if you're an international tour operator, suddenly you're going to look like a really bad actor in terms of carbon emissions, and you just have to assume that once the data is out there on that stuff, there will be financial circumstances that are financial penalties that come in. And I would think one of the big mega trends in travel is going to be, I mean, I know people have been saying it for a while, but I really do think it's going to be traveling closer to home and traveling more outdoors, closer to home, more camping, more RVs, more road trips, because I think flying is going to get very, very expensive. Anybody here read that book by Kim Stanley Robinson called The Ministry for the Future? It's interesting. It was a great book.
Looks like a big no.
Big no. Came out last year. It's a sort of he's a sci-fi writer, but he talks a lot about potential solutions to climate change. But he also talks a lot about terrorism, and the kinds of things that could start to happen, which I won't mention here. I don't want to give ideas, but it's a great read, and it gives you a sense for how there really could be a very, very negative consequences if we can't figure out how to get air travel to be much more sort of emissions light. So I mean, like, it's funny, I'm a consumer guy, I invest in consumer startups, that's generally speaking what I do. But if somebody came to me and said, look, we've cracked the code on sustainability and airline fuel, something like that, I'd be more than happy to fund something like that. Because that's, as a travel industry, what's going to happen is all those things we take for granted right now in terms of international travel, because, I mean, airline travel isn't the cause of climate change, but it's certainly a very high visibility way for people to change their behaviors. Yeah. And I do worry that the travel industry is going to find that certain destinations, because of where they are going to become out of bounds to certain kinds of travelers. There's already a lot of Europeans who won't travel to a conference like this even. They just won't do it anymore. Yeah. Companies won't let them.
Well, it's going to be an interesting thing to track over the years, especially if we're right about, AI sort of reaching a steady state of predictability. We're going to be swinging full back to climate change, sustainability, and some of those issues, because they're just going to get more intense. Now,
we're going to have to.
Yeah, we're going to kind of have to, aren't we? So you mentioned investors. So now, yeah, I mean, you were, after you came out of Expedia, and then of course you went a little tour back and helped to bail out the company that you were a bike tour operator for and served as CEO, now on a number of public boards, venture partner at TCV, but now you're investing off of your own fund, looking for consumer opportunities, other kinds of opportunities. Are you predominantly focused in the outdoor and adventure category, or are you looking more broadly than that?
Oh, well, I mean, I guess right now it does sort of feel like that. No, I'm still on the board of Bus Buds, say, where we, big marketplace for ground transportation, which I do think gets people out of planes and onto buses, which is good. But no, I'm not like a straight-up climate investor. I'm still on the board of Zillow, big real estate company. Decibel is a home energy management company. And I'm generally speaking, I like to invest really early. Like 3 people and a dog is kind of like the team often.
So what do you look for when you're talking to 3 people and a dog? Because there's a lot of 3 people and a dog out here today.
Yeah, right, exactly. What kind of dog? That's the most important question.
Sounds like
are you good with your dog? It always comes down to the same things, right? Does the strategy make sense given the macro environment? And as discussed, right now that's very difficult if it's anything around AI. Does the team appear able to, strategy makes sense, does it go to market? Makes sense given the market, right? And then does the team appear capable of pulling off the go-to-market given the strategy? And those 3 things have to line up.
And how do you make that work in this completely uncertain world of AI where people are mostly just experimenting?
And this is the giant question right now. I mean, talking to entrepreneurs right now, people are asking for guidance on sort of like pre-seed versus seed versus, and I'm sort of like, the pre-seed right now, given that none of us know what the world's going to look like in a year, you're just kind of, here's some money to try something out. And you also have to have a handshake up front that says, and we're not making a bunch of presuppositions about whether it's going to lead to further funding and so on, because we just don't know. Like, you could have an idea that's really good and really stable and makes tons of sense in the current environment, given AI and everything else, but we all understand that it could just get swept away over the next 6 months. Or you can end up having doubled down on exactly the right thing, and you're off to the races. So it's sort of like, I guess, early stage venture has always been, but with this extra thing where the external environment is changing in a way that I would say it really hasn't changed before, even though it rhymes with the rise of the internet, it kind of rhymes with the rise of mobile. But you could probably do it, the Phocuswright themes over the years. You could figure out when are the really big changes. This is one of the really big changes.
It's interesting because
You must feel the same. I mean, you do.
No, I totally. I mean, I think that this is a time of incredible experimentation, and it's also a dangerous time for entrepreneurs because they can get stuck and committed to their idea and not pivot off of it and move on to the next at bat, right? And that's a bad thing. But at the same time, you don't want, deal-a-day CEOs who are just flittering all over the place. There's got to be this combination of some staying power and commitment to a vision, but also some clarity, some honesty about whether or not the experiment is working. I mean, do you look for that in the people you're investing with now, or are you really more about, generally it's a great strategy, it seems like a reasonable team, how much money do you need to go out and get some data and some facts?
Yeah, it's a good question, because one of the things that's hard is a lot of people, when they raise a bit of money, and I'm guessing some people are in this spot, you raise some money, and then you feel very beholden to the investor, especially if it's friends and family, right? Like, you really feel like you've got to see the thing through because you sort of took this external money on. It's one of the reasons I actually tell people, don't raise money if you don't have to, and I always feel like that's true, because the pressure of getting people a return or getting them their money back, right? Professional investors, I mean, people like you and me, we just understand it's at-bats, and if you're going to hit home runs, you're going to strike out, and that is cool, and I will never give entrepreneurs a hard time. As long as they're responsible and in good faith trying to do what they're trying to do, it's fine. But a lot of people really carry a burden, and there's a fine line between grit, the ability to sort of work through obstacles, and sticking with something too long.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's enough talked about, and I feel like I saw it in COVID a bit. There were a bunch of companies that were doing perfectly well and then just got knocked on their asses by COVID through no fault of their own, right? The ultimate exogenous circumstance. And some of the founders, they internalized it and they felt like somehow it was their fault for not having been able to manage through COVID properly. And, it was really sort of hard, because that's the flip side of grit, is that sort of sense of like you have to be able to overcome everything. Well, in a world where things are as uncertain as they are right now with AI and all the rest of it, it's easy to imagine something 6 months from now that's completely unpredictable sitting right here.
Yeah.
And you just don't want people to feel bad about that and to stick with something that the circumstances changed. It would have worked, but now it's not going to work. And I think as an industry, we have to make sure that entrepreneurs feel the permission, like you said, to take another at bat.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it seems like this time, more than any other time, is a time for experimentation and testing, right? Because we have no idea where this is going.
It's freeing in a way, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, would you say that this is one of the most exciting times for startup entrepreneurs?
Well, that's a
Or do you
leading
think it's one of the most risky, scary, dangerous, like it's sort of, are you the Warren Buffett guy who says, go back to your day job and let all this noise pass? Or is it, get in there?
So I'm definitely not that guy. No, I know what you mean. They're sort of like, is it a good time to go to business school and wait it out? No, but I understand the question, yeah. So, no, right now is the time to be in the mix. And if you're not in the mix in your job, then be in the mix in your spare time. I mean, one thing that's kind of wild about these tools is they're really easy to experiment with, and they're really easy to sort of push around a little bit. I mean, we mentioned my summer camp. So it's a summer camp in Quebec, 500 kids a summer. I love it dearly. Anyway, we had to revamp the logo a little bit. And if you're a sort of marketing person, you're used to the idea of revamping a logo being actually quite a big project. And quite often there's multiple people involved in opinions and stuff. But actually, if ChatGPT is the person you're doing it with, it turns out that, first of all, you're the only opinion that matters, which is awesome. But also, they'll just iterate all day long, helping things out. And anybody here can do that. I mean, you can make up a thing that you want to work on just to see if you can pull it off, just so you understand what the conversation's about. And I mean, I know it sounds dumb, but there's a lot of the people, the high ups at a lot of these AI companies are being very open on podcasts all over the place. It's not hard to learn the outlines of what's going on, even if your job today doesn't totally determine it. But it is not the right time to put your head in the sand and sort of wait for a couple of years to see how it turns out. I would not advise that.
It's an odd sort of, hey, we have 43 seconds.
Okay.
It's an odd time too, because you've got, this sort of pressure on experimentation. So there's a lot of pre-seed bets, a lot of people sort of taking shots on goal. But we still have a bit of an overhang from, high rates, right? So the Series A guys, yours truly included, have drifted away and are now looking for more revenue, more clear path to profitability because money's now more expensive. And so, somehow the journey for the entrepreneur has gotten a little bit precarious between that early experiment and then, stepping up to the next level. How do you coach people to make it through that?
Well, I mean,
2 seconds or
well,
less.
in 2 seconds, carefully. No, I think what it comes down to is you have to feel like you could go back for more at-bats because that very early stage money is still there for you, even if you can't get through the Series A gate.
Yeah.
And getting through the Series A gate is definitely much harder than it used to be.
Yeah.
But these things are all cycles, right? The pendulum is swinging, and it is swinging back. The easy money will flow again. As soon as the full landscape becomes clearer,
yes,
there will be another huge funding boom.
Interesting.
2-3 years.
You heard it here. Thank you, Erik. Appreciate it.
Okay. Cheers. Thanks.